So hello everyone. So today, me and my group mates will discuss to you the upsurge of nationalism in Asia. So before we proceed to the discussion, I would like to introduce to you first myself and my group mates. So my name is Ryan Reno from BSED1 and my group mates are Elizabeth Rufo Caragay, Junel Donato Garay, Merrick Kayla Mari, Monica Cardinosa Camorongan, Nadeline Kayagog Palasin, Rona Rosario, Rowena Retonda Rosete, and Telma Duque Castro. So of course, there was no doubt that from the beginning, the people of the Far East were never happy over the imposition of Western rule. Western domination was facilitated by the fact that the West came to the East at a time when the former pulsing the vigor of new political and cultural achievements while the latter was in a state of decrepitude. By adopting much of the culture of the Occident, the civilized people of the East gradually reversed the process by which the political and economic hegemony of the white men had been achieved. In the course thereof, national consciousness among the subject people was born. The aftershock of Japan's transformation continued to be felt throughout East and Southeast Asia as traditional societies strove to adjust to the impact of new ideas and technologies. All the while, a stream of new religious and ideological missionaries, political idealists, and new economic colonizers poured across the Pacific Asian ports from Europe and increasingly from the United States. The imperative to modernize was most keenly felt by a new generation of intellectuals whose thinking was shaped by both their traditional upbringing and their access to Western education and ideas. The changes they contemplated were as much cultural as political or economic. They involved massive transformation even in basic language and expression, as in China, Korea, and Vietnam, where the gulf between the historic language of the intelligentsia and popular expression at the beginning of the 19th century was in many ways as wide as the gap between the Latin-speaking clerks of the early European Renaissance and the mass of barely literate vernacular speakers below them. Everywhere, the same questions were pondered. What can be taken from the West? How can it be used? How can it be registered? So let's find out.
Good day, ma'am. Good day, everyone. My name is Rona De Rosario from BSED1, and this is my report. The development of nationalism in the Far East. In the closing years of the 20th century, the surging tides of nationalism brought increasing unrest in many of the regions in the Far East where the man had imposed his rule. This unrest was particularly marked in the India and the Philippines, especially in latter, where the nationalist movement was spearheaded by a crop of aggressive and militant Filipino propagandists. As the 20th century ushered in, the trends toward independence experienced a rapid growth. This was due to a combination of factors. First one is colonial rule. Main concern of foreigners was in making profits of themselves. Local people were forced to work hard for them because these local people live in hardship and poverty. The second one is Western education. Western education, many locals educated in the West were exposed to new ideas and freedom. Upon return, they began to share the feelings of their own people. They led social and political nationalist movement. And the third one is economic thrift. Western educated locals did not want to be economically denominated by foreigners. The arrivals, Chinese and Indian immigrants and their success models locals resentful. This stirred up more feelings of nationalism. And the fourth one is religion. Islam played an important role as unifying factor in the nationalist movements of Southeast Asia. And the last is the Asian nationalism. The struggle for independence of sound Independence of some Asian nation inspired the locals of Southeast Asia.
Hello, ma'am. Hello, guys. Ang report ko po ay Rise of Indian Nationalism. Indian national movements can be divided into three phases. During the first phases, if from 1885 to 1905, the Indian National Congress was dominated by the Motigrates. In the second phase, from 1906 to 1919, the extremists emerged. During the third phase, from 1920 to 1947, Mohandas Gandhi played the leading role. Gandhi, promptly called Mahatma by the masses, was foremost figures in the freedom movements. He struck the British Empire by his non-violent non-cooperation, satyagraha, boycott of British goods and Swandishi campaign, and the several factors and contributes about po sa Rise of Indian Nationalism. Meron po tayong political unification, impact of Western education, rediscovery of Indians, glorious past, religions, reform movements, growth of the vernacular literature, press and newspaper, economic exploitation of British, and racial antagonism. Yun lamang po. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Rowena Ritonda Rosete from BS Ed 1. So my report is all about beginning of nationalist ideas in China. At the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century, there was a national awakening of nationalism where the ruthless economic exploitation of the country by the European imperialists. Besides this, the social, economic, and political exploitation of the Chinese by the reigning Manchu dynasty in collaboration with the Chinese landlords and the warlords resulted in great poverty in China. This aggravated the nationalist spirit of the masses. Yun nga yung sa pagtatapos ng 19th at pagsisimula ng 20th century, nagkaroon ng national awakening of nationalism na kung saan ay walang awa ang pagsasamantala sa ekonomiya ng bansa ng mga imperialista ng Europa. Bukod pa dito, ang social, economic at political na pagsasamantala sa mga Chinese ng reigning Manchu dynasty sa pakikipagtulungan ng mga Chinese landlords at mga warlords ay nagresulta sa matinding kahirapan sa China at hindi lang yun. Pinalalapan nito ang nationalist spirit of the masses o diwang nasyonalista ng masses. In 1990, the Boxer Rebellion broke out with the aim of overthrowing the Manchu dynasty and of expelling all foreigners from the soil of China. However, this rebellion was ruthlessly crushed by the combined armed forces of England, Russia, Germany, Japan, and the USA. In 1901, China was forced to accept the humiliating terms of the Treaty of Peking with the European powers. Noong 1990, ang Boxer Rebellion ay sumiklab na may hangaring ibagsak ang dynastiyang Manchu at palayasin ang lahat ng mga dayuhan mula sa lupa ng China. Walang tigil ang durog ng pinagsamang sandatang lakas ng mga bansang England, Germany, Japan at USA ang paghihimagsik na ito. Napilitang tanggapin ng China ang nakakahiyang mga tuntunin ng Treaty of Peking kasama ang mga kapangyarihan ng Europa noong 1901. In 1894, Dr. Sun Yat-sen, father of New China, founded in Chinese Revival Society, later called the Kuomintang or People's National Party. Dr. Sun developed a philosophy of nationalism for China. His ideology was nationalistic, anti-dynastic, increasingly and anti-monarchical, and finally republican. Noong 1894 naman, si Dr. Sun Yat-sen ang ama ng New China na ang lipunang muling pagbabangon ng Chinese na kalaunan ay tinawag na Kuomintang o Pambansang Partido ng Mga Tao. Si Dr. Sun rin ang bumuo ng isang pilosopiya ng nasyonalismo para sa China. His ideology was nationalistic, anti-dynastic, increasingly, and anti-monarchical, and finally republican. In 1911, there was a revolution which overthrew the Manchu dynasty. This dynasty and continued to rule for 268 years. China became a republic, with Dr. Sun as the first president. Soon, internal strife began since General Yuan, who was in charge of the northern provinces, wished to head the government of the republic. In order to maintain the unity and solidarity of the Chinese nation, Dr. Sun resigned in favor of General Yuan. However, General Yuan began to govern China dictatorially. Noong 1911, nagkaroon ng isang revolusyon na nagpatalsik sa Manchu dynasty. At ang dynasty na ito ay nagpatuloy na mamuno sa loob ng 268 na taon. At ang Chinese ay naging isang republika kasama si Dr. Sun bilang unang pangulo. Di nagtagal, nagsimula ang panloob na pagtatalo dahil si General Yuan na namamahala sa mga northern provinces ay nagnanais na mamuno sa gobyerno ng republika. Upang mapanatili ang pagkakaisa ng bansang Chino, si Dr. Sun ay nagbitiw ng pabor kay General Yuan. During the World War I, a civil war broke out, resulting in the establishment of two rival governments. One was centered at Peking in the north and the other at Canton in the south. There were many local military rulers in many provinces. Sa panahon ng World War I, isang digmaang sibil ang sumiklab na nagresulta sa pagtatapos ng dalawang magkaribal na gobyerno. Ang isang nakasentro sa Peking sa hilaga at ang isa naman sa Canton sa timog. Maraming mga lokal na pinuno ang militar sa maraming mga lalawigan. The nationalists under Dr. Sun were driven out of Peking in this civil strife. They established a rival government at Canton. In 1921, Dr. Sun was elected President of the Chinese Republic. Dr. Sun's national philosophy consisted of three main ideas. The first one is nationalism. Nationalism to make China a nation state and to free from foreign control. Second is sovereignty of the people, establishment of democracy in the country. And last is socialism. The needs of all should be supplied as far as possible by the efforts of all. Thank you.
Beginning of nationalist ideas in China. At the end of the 19th and the beginning of 20th century, there was a national awakening of nationalism where the ruthless economic exploitation of the country by the European imperialists. Besides this, the social, economic, and political exploitation of Chinese by the reigning Manchu dynasty in collaboration with the Chinese landlords and the warlords resulted in great poverty in China. This aggravated the nationalist spirit of the masses. In 1990, the Boxer Rebellion broke out with the aim of overthrowing the Manchu dynasty and of expelling all foreigners from the soil of China. However, this rebellion was ruthlessly crushed by the combined armed forces of England, Russia, Germany, Japan, and the USA. In 1901, China was forced to accept the humiliating terms of the Treaty of Peking with the European powers. In 1894, Dr. Sun Yat-sen, father of the New China, founded the Chinese Revival Society, later called the Kuomintang or People's National Party. Dr. Sun developed a philosophy of nationalism for China. His ideology was nationalistic, anti-dynastic, increasingly, and anti-monarchical, and finally republican. In 1911, there was a revolution which overthrew the Manchu dynasty. This dynasty and continued to rule for 268 years. China became a republic with Dr. Sun as the first president. Soon, internal strife began, since General Yuan, who was in charge of the northern provinces, wished to head the government of the republic. In order to maintain the unity and solidarity of the Chinese nation, Dr. Sun resigned in favor of General Yuan. However, General Yuan began to govern China dictatorially. During the World War I, a civil war broke out, resulting in the establishment of two rival governments. One was centered on Peking in the north and the other at Canton in the south. There were many local military rulers in many provinces. The nationalists under Dr. Sun were driven out of Peking in this civil strife. They established a rival government at Canton. In 1921, Dr. Sun was elected president of the Chinese Republic. Dr. Sun's national philosophy consisted of three.
Chinese nationalism emerging in the late Qing dynasty is a response to the humiliating defeat in the First Sino-Japanese War and the invasion and pillaging of Beijing by Eight-Nation Alliance. In the both cases, in the aftermath, forced China to pay financial reparation and grant special privilege to the foreigners to the nationwide image of China as a superior celestial empire at the center of the universe was stemmed in the last-minute effort by the modernized strength. The old system were unsuccessful. These last-minute efforts were best exemplified by Liang Quichu, a Qing dynasty reform who failed to reform the Qing government in 1896 and was later expelled to Japan, where he began work in this idea of Chinese nationalism. The effect World War I. continually spent Chinese nationalism despite joining alliance powers. China was again severely humiliated by the Versailles Treaty of 1919, which transferred the special privilege given of Germany of the Empire of Japan. This resulted in the Manifold Government of 1990, which developed into nationwide protests that saw a surge of China nationalism. Large-scale military campaigns led by the Kuomintang during the World Warlord era that overpowered provincial warlords and sharply reduced special privilege of foreigners helped further strengthen and aggrandize a sense of Chinese national identity. After Imperial Japan was defeated in World War II, Chinese nationalism again track of as China recovered lost territories previously lost of Japan, including Manchuria and Taiwan. However, the Chinese Civil War, which had posed in the face to Japanese invasion, had resumed, damaging the image of unified Chinese identity. The communities were victorious in 1949 as the Kuomintang retreat of the Taiwan. Under the Mu Zedong of Chinese Community Party began to employ Chinese nationalism as the political tool using Chinese nationalism. The Chinese Community Party began to suppress separatism and secessionism attitudes in Tibet and among the Arghooks Turkic minority in the far west province of Ginseng, an issue that persists. Over the next decades, Chinese nationalism was influenced strongly by racial ethnographic thinking and the official ideology of the PRC. Assist that China in the multi-ethnic state and the Han Chinese despite being the overwhelming majority, over 95% in the mainland. They are only one of the many ethnic groups of China, each of whose culture and language shall be respected. However, many critics argue that despite that this official view, assimilationist attitudes remain deeply entrenched and popular view and actual power relationship create a situation in which Chinese nationalism has an practice mean hand dominance of majority areas and people and assimilating of those groups.
Growth and development of Japan. During the Meiji era, Japan became one of the highly industrialized countries of the world. Japan emerged as an imperialist nation in the Sino-Japanese War from 1894 to 1895, resulting in the independence of Korea, which came under Japanese influence. Japan also acquired Formosa by the Russo-Japan War on 1904 to 1905. Japan ousted Russia from Manchuria. Japan also became a first-rate industrial power in East. During the First World War, Japan was the ally of the British and secured some benefits from the Treaty of Versailles. She became a permanent member of League of Nations. During the war, Japan attempted to intervene in China's affairs. In 1931, Japan seized Manchuria and withdrew from the League of Nations. Japan soon became as aggressive as Germany and Italy, and these three powers formed Second World War. By 1938, Japan occupied the entire Chinese coast and the important Chinese sites. In December 1941, the American fleet at Pearl Harbor in the island of Hawaii was attacked by Japan. She also overran the Philippine Islands, the Dutch East Indies, and Malaya. The Japanese, the Luk, Rangon, and Mandalay in Burma. The defeat of Italy and Germany during World War II was a great setback of Japan. August 1945, President Truman of the USA ordered 2 atomic bombs to be dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Japan was forced to surrender. After the occupation of Japan, the American forces, the General MacArthur, made the integration of Japan complete. Being a vigorous people, the Japanese showed quick signs of recovery. In 1947, elections were held in Japan and democratic constitution was established. A peace treaty with Japan was signed by all relevant nations at San Francisco.